Naima Jones had always lived a quiet, sheltered life. Her world was small, her heart soft, and her trust still untouched despite the storms that had battered her family over the years. At 24, she radiated a kind of natural beauty that couldn't be taught. Her cocoa-brown skin glowed in the morning sun, her long braids fell neatly down her back, and her dark eyes carried a silent strength far older than her years. She had spent most of her life trying to survive under the heavy shadow of her older brother, Darius. After their mother passed when Naima was just a little girl, it had been Darius who held the family together, at first. He had been her protector, her guide, the only person who truly made her feel safe. But after their cold and distant father died, something in Darius broke. He spiraled into the world of gambling, drinking, and quick schemes. Naima had begged him to stop. She cried, pleaded, and prayed. But Darius only brushed her off with a crooked smile and hollow promises. He swore he had everything under control. But she knew the truth. Darius was drowning. And one night, her worst fear became reality. Naima was sitting alone in their tiny two-bedroom apartment, a book in her lap, when the front door burst open. Darius stormed in like a man on the run. His skin was pale, his hands shook, and panic was written all over his face. "Darius?" She stood up immediately, her heart thudding. "What happened? What's wrong?" He didn't answer. He only paced, his breath erratic, his eyes darting toward the door like it might explode. Before she could ask again, there was a hard knock, sharp, deliberate, terrifying. Darius froze. The door swung open without invitation. A tall, broad-shouldered man stepped inside, commanding the entire room just by breathing. He wore a fitted black suit that spoke of power, and his copper-brown skin shimmered under the dim ceiling light. His jaw was clean-cut, lined by a well-groomed beard, and his deep-set eyes, steel-gray and ruthless, locked onto Naima without hesitation. Everything in her body screamed danger. "Julius, please, just give me more time," Darius begged, stepping forward like a child before a storm. The man, Julius West, didn't say a word. He simply raised a hand, silencing Darius, with the flick of a wrist. Then his eyes turned back to Naima, slowly, deliberately. "There is no more time," he said, his voice smooth but cutting, like a blade wrapped in silk. Naima's heart skipped. "Time for what?" she asked, turning toward Darius. "What is he talking about?" Darius couldn't look at her. "I owe him money," he muttered. Naima's throat tightened. "How much?" "2 million, Julius answered for him, his lips curling into a cruel half-smile. Her knees went weak. 2 million, Darius, and how? "I thought I could flip it back," he stammered. "I was so close." "You weren't close," Julius snapped. "You lost, and now you pay." Naima's fists clenched. "Then what does that have to do with me?" Julius took a step forward. "Your brother offered you an exchange." The world around her tilted. "What?" she whispered, her voice cracking. Darius finally looked at her, but his eyes were full of shame. "Naima, I didn't have another way. You promised," she whispered, taking a step back. "You said you'd never drag me into your mess." "I had no choice. There's always a choice," she cried. Julius was beside her in 2 steps, his hand latched onto her wrist, not harsh, but immovable. "Enough," he said flatly. Naima struggled. "You can't just take me. You come willingly, or your brother pays with his life." Her breath caught. "You're going to kill him?" "No," Julius replied, unbothered. "I'll have him buried in debt so deep he'll wish I had." She turned to Darius, tears spilling from her eyes. "You're letting this happen. I'm sorry," he whispered. "You sold me," she screamed, "like I'm nothing." "But—" Darius didn't speak, he didn't move. His silence was louder than anything he could have said. Julius didn't wait. He pulled her toward the door as she thrashed, kicked, begged. "Let me go," she shouted. But he carried her like she weighed nothing. Out the door, down the stairs, and into a sleek black SUV parked at the curb. Naima pounded on the windows as they pulled away, her voice hoarse from crying. Through the blur of tears, she saw Darius standing in the doorway, his head bowed. He never looked up. The ride felt like a descent into a nightmare. Naima sat curled against the far corner of the SUV's plush leather seat, her arms wrapped around herself. Her eyes, still swollen from crying, stayed fixed on the world rushing by outside, though none of it registered. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and blue, as if trying to outrun the reality pressing down on her chest. Across from her sat Julius West, impossibly composed. One arm rested on the door, the other holding a crystal glass of dark liquor. He stared at her. Not cruelly, not kindly, just studying her like she was something he owned, something he hadn't decided what to do with yet. "You don't need to fight anymore," Julius finally said, his voice low and calm. "What's done is done." Naima's head snapped toward him. Her voice was raw. "You're disgusting." A faint smirk touched his lips. "I've been called worse." Naima turned back toward the window, her fists clenching. She wasn't afraid of silence, but this silence, this eerie, rich man's silence, gnawed at her. And beneath her fury, a new emotion had begun to settle. Dread. The SUV rolled to a stop before an enormous set of black iron gates. They opened slowly, silently, as if even the steel was afraid to make a sound. Beyond them stretched a long, winding driveway lined with flickering lanterns and manicured hedges. And at the end, a mansion. No. An estate. No. A palace. White marble columns towered toward the night sky. Massive glass windows reflected the glowing lanterns like fire dancing in crystal. The double front doors were made of dark oak and polished gold, tall enough to swallow her whole. Naima's breath caught. She had never seen anything like this in her life. The driver opened Julius's door first. He stepped out with effortless confidence, then turned and opened hers. His hand reached. "Inside, out," he said. Naima didn't move. "I wasn't asking." His tone wasn't angry. It was simply fact. When she didn't respond, Julius leaned in, gripped her wrist again, not painfully but with unshakable authority, and helped her out. Her feet touched the stone, but she nearly stumbled. He caught her by the waist, steadying her for just a moment, and Naima hated how warm his touch felt. "Follow me." She wanted to run, but her legs wouldn't listen. She followed him past the butler, an older man in a flawless suit, standing at attention like a statue, through the towering doors and into a world that felt nothing like hers. The foyer was enormous. Gleaming black and gold marble floors stretched beneath a ceiling so high it echoed. A grand staircase with ornate golden railings curved like a wave to the second floor. 2 chandeliers, real crystal, not glass, dripped light from above. Naima felt smaller than she ever had in her life. She took a step forward and the door shut behind her with a heavy final thud. The sound made her jump. Julius turned to face her. His gray eyes darkened slightly as they swept over her again. "This is your home now," he said flatly. Naima shook her head. "No, I'm not staying here. You can't keep me." "I already have," he replied without blinking. She clenched her fists. "You think you can buy me? Own me?" Julius stepped toward her. She backed away instinctively until her back hit the cool marble wall. His arms came up, bracing the wall on either side of her head, caging her in. He leaned in close, not touching her, but so near she could feel the heat of his breath. "I don't think," he said quietly. "I know." Naima's breath caught. His scent, dark, smoky, expensive, wrapped around her, making her lightheaded. "I'm not a possession," she whispered. Julius's eyes flickered, something unreadable passing through them. "Then prove me wrong." Her heart slammed against her ribs. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice cracking. His answer was a whisper. "Everything." And then he stepped back, just like that. Cold control snapping back into place. "Upstairs," he said, turning toward the grand staircase. Naima didn't move. Naima. She froze. It was the first time he had said her name. The way it rolled off his tongue, too smooth, too intimate, made her shiver. When she still didn't follow, he turned, walked back to her, and without warning scooped her into his arms. "Put me down," she shouted, struggling in his grip. Julius didn't flinch. He carried her like she weighed nothing. Up the marble stairs, down a long, dark hallway, past doors she couldn't count. He stopped at the end of the corridor, pushed open a set of double doors with his foot, and stepped into a bedroom that looked like it belonged in a movie. A massive four-poster bed dressed in ivory silk stood at the center. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline. The walls were lined with shelves of books and artwork she didn't recognize but somehow knew were expensive. He set her down on the edge of the bed and crouched before her. His hand lifted to her face, gentle, unexpected. His thumb brushed her lip. Naima jerked back. "Why are you doing this?" She whispered. Julius's eyes darkened. "Because you're mine," he said. "And I don't share." He stood and walked toward the door. "Sleep," he ordered. "Tomorrow we begin." Then he was gone, and Naima was left alone, trembling, in a stranger's palace with a storm building outside, and an even bigger one building inside her. Thunder cracked like the sky was being torn apart. Naima lay in the center of the enormous bed, too afraid to sleep, too exhausted to cry. Outside, rain lashed against the tall windows. Inside, silence pressed in like a weight. The room smelled faintly of lavender and wood polish, but nothing could cover the icy dread pooling in her stomach. Her brother had given her away. Her freedom, her dignity, traded like a bag of groceries for a debt he never should have made. She didn't know who Julius West truly was. She didn't know what he wanted from her, and that was the most terrifying part. Hours passed, or maybe just minutes. Time no longer made sense. Then she heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Approaching. The door creaked open. Julius entered, drenched, from the rain, his black suit clinging to his broad frame. His shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, revealing the sharp lines of his chest. Water dripped from his short, textured hair, catching on the angle of his jaw. Naima sat up in the bed, heart pounding. She instinctively pulled the silk sheet higher over her chest, as if it could protect her from the man now filling the doorway. Julius didn't speak right away. He just looked at her, his gray eyes unreadable, intense. Then, to her shock, he stepped inside and headed past her, toward the fireplace across the room. He bent down, lit it with practiced ease, and stood there, watching the flames take shape. The orange glow cast flickering shadows across his face, softening the hard edges. Naima's voice shook. "Why are you here?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked toward the armchair near the fire and sat, rolling up his sleeves. "I had a deal go sideways," he said after a moment, his voice rough. "I needed silence, and I remembered you were here." Her brow furrowed. "So I'm a distraction now?" He looked at her then. Really looked. "No," he said. "You're a surprise." Naima shifted on the bed. Her heart was racing, but something in his tone wasn't as sharp as before. He seemed tired. Not weak, not broken, but tired in a way only men with too much power ever looked. "I don't want to be here," she whispered. "I know. You bought me." "I did." Her throat tightened. "I'm not a thing." "No," Julius said, his voice lower now. "You're not." Their eyes met, and in the glow of the fire she saw it, just for a second, a flicker of something else behind his wall of control. Regret? Loneliness? He stood suddenly and walked over to her side of the room. She backed up on the bed instinctively, but he didn't reach for her. Instead, he crouched again, resting his forearms on his knees. "Why are you trembling?" he asked quietly. "I'm not," she lied. His eyes dropped to her hands. They were shaking. Julius exhaled through his nose. Slowly, he reached out and brushed a braid off her face. She flinched but didn't pull away. "You're scared of me," he said. "You took me from my life," she said, her voice breaking. "What else would I be?" "I could have forced you," Julius murmured. "But I didn't." Naima's chest rose and fell rapidly. "What do you want from me?" He didn't answer right away. His thumb brushed the soft curve of her jaw. "Don't know anymore." Naima's breath caught. The room felt too hot. "You're lying," she whispered. "Maybe." And then slowly he leaned in. His lips brushed hers. Not harsh, not forceful. Just a whisper of contact. Naima froze, her heart pounding so loud she was sure he could hear it. Her hands hovered, unsure whether to push him away or pull him closer. When he finally kissed her for real, it wasn't violent. It was terrifyingly tender. Her first kiss. And Julius West, ruthless, untouchable Julius, felt it. He pulled back, suddenly, as if something hit him in the chest. He looked at her lips, then her eyes. "Naima." His voice cracked. "Tell me, has anyone ever kissed you before?" She shook her head, barely a whisper. "No." Julius's breath hitched. He reached out and lifted her chin. "You've never?" She couldn't speak. She just shook her head again. A raw sound escaped his throat. It wasn't lust. It wasn't pride. It was something darker, more possessive. "You're untouched." Naima blinked back tears, suddenly ashamed. But he didn't mock her. He didn't smirk. He only touched her cheek with the back of his fingers, reverent. "You belong to me now," he said roughly. Naima's voice trembled. "I don't understand you." "You don't need to," he murmured. "Just don't run." And then he stood and walked toward the door. "Sleep," he said again, quieter this time. The door closed. Naima curled into the bed, breathless. Her lips still tingled from the kiss. Her mind was spinning. She didn't know what Julius truly wanted. But tonight, she saw something he didn't mean to show, and it scared her more than everything else. The next morning, soft, golden light filtered through the gauzy white curtains. The storm had passed, but Naima's mind was still a whirlwind. She sat on the edge of the bed, her bare feet brushing the cool marble floor, her braids cascading over one shoulder. Her lips still burned from that kiss. Her first kiss. The thought stirred something wild and confusing inside her. She hadn't wanted it, hadn't asked for it, but she hadn't stopped it either. And that scared her more than Julius West's power or the mansion's towering silence. The door creaked open. She stiffened. Julius entered, dressed simply in a black cashmere sweater and charcoal slacks. No suit, no tie. And for the first time, he didn't look like a billionaire titan. He looked like a man trying to calm a storm inside himself. "You're awake," he said quietly. Naima nodded. Her breath caught when he walked toward her. He reached out and brushed a braid over her shoulder. "Did you sleep?" She hesitated. "A little." His fingers lingered against her collarbone before sliding down to her jaw. His touch wasn't forceful. It was cautious, careful, almost afraid. "Good," he said, then leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. Naima's lips parted in shock. He didn't say another word as he turned and left the room. For the rest of the day, the mansion's energy had changed. Julius didn't hover. He didn't issue commands. Instead, he kept his distance, watching her from afar, walking the estate with hands tucked into his pockets like a man haunted by a decision he couldn't undo. Later that afternoon, Naima wandered through the garden. The mansion's estate stretched endlessly. Marble statues, winding paths, tall hedges trimmed into impossible shapes. She stopped beneath a flowering tree, the scent of jasmine heavy in the air. "Do you like it here?" His voice startled her. She turned to see Julius a few feet away, standing in the filtered sunlight like a painting brought to life. His posture was relaxed, his eyes unreadable, but the sharpness from before was gone. "It's beautiful," she admitted cautiously. Julius stepped closer, slowly. When he reached her, he reached out, his hand brushing over the end of her braid again. She flinched, but didn't move away. "You should wear your hair down," he murmured. "It would suit you." "I wouldn't know how," she said honestly. "I could show you." Naima's heart skipped. She looked up at him, trying to make sense of the contradiction. How this cold man could speak with such warmth. "Why are you being kind to me?" Julius looked at her for a long time. His jaw clenched. His gaze dropped to her lips, then back, to her eyes. "Because you're not a transaction to me anymore," he said. "You never were." Her breath caught. He moved his hand to hers, fingers lacing with hers. "Come with me," she hesitated, but she followed. He led her down a path toward a glass conservatory tucked at the edge of the garden. Inside, the air was warm and filled with the scent of orchids. They sat together on a wooden bench, their fingers still joined. "Tell me about your life," Julius said. Naima looked away. "There's nothing to tell." "Tell me anyway." And so she did. Haltingly at first, then with more depth. She told him about her childhood, her mother's death, the weight of raising herself in a home full of chaos, about how Darius went from protector to predator, about the quiet loneliness that followed her like a second shadow. By the end, her voice cracked. A tear slid down her cheek. Julius didn't look away. He didn't interrupt. When she was done, he reached for her chin and gently tilted her face toward his. "You were never the problem," he said. "And your brother was a coward for handing you away." Her breath hitched. "But you still took me." "I did." His hand slid from her, chin to her cheek. "And I don't regret it." Naima's eyes filled. "Why?" His voice dropped to a whisper. "Because I didn't know what I needed until you were standing in front of me." The silence wrapped around them like velvet. Then he leaned in, his lips grazing her forehead. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said. "But I'll make you feel safe, I swear it." Naima didn't speak. But for the first time since she had been taken, she didn't feel like running. She felt still, grounded, terrified, but safe. And when he looked at her again, she saw it, the war happening behind his eyes. He wasn't letting her go. And somewhere deep down, she didn't want him to. The sun hung low on the horizon, bathing the estate in amber light. Naima sat at the edge of the long mahogany dining table, barely touching the food set before her. Her thoughts were a tangled knot, of confusion, of longing, of fear. It had been days since the night Julius kissed her, days since he told her she belonged to him. And yet, he hadn't touched her again. Not forcefully, not even gently. He had only watched her with those stormy gray eyes, always from a distance, always quietly smoldering. That confused her more than anything. He didn't treat her like a hostage anymore. He treated her like something rare, something fragile, something his own hands might break. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Her pulse quickened before she even looked up. Julius entered. He was dressed in a black silk shirt, the top buttons undone, revealing a sliver of his chest. His sleeves were rolled to his forearms. He looked like danger made flesh, but it wasn't his clothes or his build that made her heart stutter. It was the way he looked at her, like she was the only person left in the world. Without a word, he stopped beside her and held out his hand. "Come with me." Naima stared at it. Then, slowly, she placed her hand in his. He led her out of the dining hall, his grip firm but not forceful, down the gleaming marble corridor to the front of the mansion, where a sleek black sports car waited. "In the driveway. Where are we going?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Julius opened her door and helped her in. "You'll see." The car ride was quiet. The city rushed past in streaks of neon and shadow. At some point his hand found hers again, resting on her thigh, fingers interlaced. He didn't speak. He didn't explain, but his thumb brushed over her knuckles like he was reminding himself she was real. They stopped outside a boutique she'd never seen before. Glass windows trimmed in gold, the name etched in delicate cursive. Inside, it looked like something out of a fashion dream. Gowns lined in perfect rows, soft lighting bouncing off crystal chandeliers. Naima hesitated. "Julius?" He stepped beside her. "Because I want to give you everything." She blinked. "But why? Let me do this," he said softly. "Please." Inside, the staff greeted him with immediate deference. "Mr. West," one of them said with a small bow. "How may we assist you?" Julius gestured toward her. "Dress her." Naima's cheeks flushed. "Julius—" "No arguments," he said gently but firmly. "Let me take care of you." A group of assistants swarmed politely, guiding her into a plush dressing room. She stood frozen as they helped her into a pale gold silk gown, the fabric whispering over her skin like sunlight made solid. Her braids tumbled over her shoulder as she turned toward the mirror and gasped. For the first time, she didn't just look beautiful. She felt it. Behind her, she saw Julius appear in the reflection, standing just inside the dressing room doorway. His eyes darkened as they met hers in the mirror. He walked forward, his movement slow and deliberate until he stood directly behind her. His hand slid around her waist as his gaze locked with hers through the glass. "You're perfect," he murmured. Naima's breath caught. "Why are you doing this?" He turned her to face him, his hand cupping her cheek, his gray eyes burning with something fierce and raw. "Because I want you to see what I see when I look at you." She stared up at him, trembling. "And what do you see?" "You," he whispered. "The woman I can't stop thinking about. The woman who's turned my entire world upside down." His lips brushed her forehead. "You're not just collateral anymore, Naima. You're everything." The words settled into her chest like thunder rolling over a mountain. He led her back to the car with his hand around hers, possessive, proud. This time she didn't pull away. That evening, after a quiet dinner, Julius didn't return to his wing. He came for her. She didn't run. And when he took her hand and led her through the mansion's grand halls, past the portraits and chandeliers, and endless wealth, she followed him into a space she had never entered before, his private quarters. They stepped into a darkened room lit only by the moonlight spilling through the windows. In the center stood a bed draped in rich fabric, a symbol of control and comfort all at once. He didn't rush her, didn't command her. He simply sat and gently pulled her down beside him. "Naima," he said, voice low and husky. "I've spent my whole life building walls, but you—" She looked up at him, her eyes wide and uncertain. "You walked right through them." Her lips parted. "I don't know how to love," she whispered. Julius leaned in, his forehead brushing hers. "Then let me show you." And when he kissed her, slowly, deeply, Naima's heart stopped fighting, because for the first time, she didn't want to escape. She wanted to stay. The night air carried a salt-sweet breeze as waves rolled gently across the shore. A private beach stretched out in soft curves beneath the moonlight, secluded and quiet, like a hidden world carved from silver and shadow. Naima stood barefoot in the sand, her white dress swaying lightly in the wind. Her smooth brown skin glowed in the moonlight, her braids spilling over her shoulder like dark silk. The ocean whispered against the shore, but her heart beat louder than the waves. A bonfire flickered nearby, casting soft light on the only other person on the beach. Julius West. He stood a few feet away, his white shirt unbuttoned at the top, sleeves rolled to his forearms. The firelight danced across the strong angles of his face, making him look like something sculpted from smoke and flame. His eyes were locked on her, gray, intense, unblinking. Naima's breath trembled as he walked toward her. His polished shoes left faint prints in the sand. He stopped just inches away, reached up, and gently tucked a loose braid behind her ear. His fingertips lingered on her cheek. "Naima," he said, his voice low and hoarse. "I need to tell you something." She looked up at him, her eyes wide. His thumb brushed over her bottom lip. "I never meant to feel anything for you. When your brother handed you over, I was furious. Numb. I saw you as a piece in a power play, a way to hurt him back." Her chest ached. But then, Julius shook his head like he still couldn't believe it. "You looked at me. You challenged me. You didn't break, and somehow you shattered everything I thought I knew." His hand moved down to cradle her jaw. "You made me feel again." Naima's heart squeezed, her lips trembling. "I don't want a world without you in it," he whispered. "I don't want anything, if it's not with you." Then he stepped back. Her breath caught as he reached into his pocket, and slowly, deliberately sank to one knee. The velvet box in his hand gleamed in the firelight. Inside sat a diamond ring, sparkling like it had been stolen from the stars. "Marry me," he said, his voice raw. "Let me spend the rest of my life loving you, protecting you, worshipping every piece of you." Naima stared down at him, frozen. No, I don't deserve it," Julius continued, his hands shaking slightly. "But I swear on everything I will spend every day proving that I'm worthy of your love." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "Say yes," he whispered. "Please." Naima. Her knees gave out. She dropped into the sand in front of him, her breath shuddering, her hand lifting to touch his face, his jaw, his lips. She didn't trust her voice, but the word finally broke free. "Yes," she whispered. Julius's breath hitched. "Yes," she said again, louder this time. "I'll marry you." A wild sound escaped his throat, part joy, part relief. In one swift motion, he slid the ring onto her finger, then wrapped her in his arms. "You're mine now," he whispered fiercely into her hair. Naima clung to him, trembling as he kissed her, hard and full of aching need. The fire crackled behind them, the ocean whispered all around, and when he finally pulled back, their foreheads touched. "I love you," Julius whispered. "I love you too," she said, voice breaking. And when he scooped her into his arms and carried her toward the beachside cabana, Naima knew she wasn't being taken anymore. She was being chosen. The ceremony was small, private. Just them, the ocean, and a sky full of stars. Julius insisted on no headlines, no cameras, no lavish guest lists. He didn't care about appearances. Not anymore. All he wanted was Naima, standing across from him in a white satin dress, her braids adorned with pearls, her smile trembling as she said, "I do." From that night forward, everything changed. The man who had once ruled boardrooms with a cold stare and silence now revolved his life around the woman he once claimed like a possession, and now loved like a lifeline. Naima woke each morning to the soft scent of fresh coffee and the warmth of breakfast trays set beside their bed, fruit, pastries, folded linen napkins. And always, Julius was there, sitting at her side. "Morning, beautiful," he'd whisper, brushing his lips against her temple as his hand slid gently through her braids. She'd smile, still half asleep, and even then, she could feel it. His eyes on her like she was a miracle he never expected to deserve. Julius's obsession with her happiness became obvious to everyone around him. At business meetings, he no longer showed up alone. Naima sat beside him, her hand in his, her voice softly offering opinions no one had asked for, until Julius would stop the room cold. "What do you think, love?" he'd ask, ignoring the stunned silence of his board members. Naima would hesitate, unsure her thoughts even belonged in this high-powered world. But Julius would squeeze her hand and nod, urging her. "Your opinion matters. Say it." And when she did, tentatively, nervously, he'd listen, truly listen. If she saw a flaw, he fixed it. If she had a vision, he backed it. No dismissals, no overtalking, just full attention. It didn't take long for others to notice the shift. The once feared mogul who built empires through ruthless deals now laughed more easily, softened in her presence. The man who once inspired fear now inspired curiosity because of the woman at his side. Naima felt it most when he brought her into rooms that once intimidated her. At galas, he kept an arm around her waist, introducing her as my wife with quiet pride. His gaze burned with protectiveness when eyes lingered too long on her. And when Naima spoke to someone else, he watched her, not out of jealousy, but admiration. After those events, they'd return home late. Julius would pull off his tie, roll up his sleeves, and head straight to the kitchen. "Let me cook," he'd say, already reaching for ingredients. "You can cook?" Naima teased the first time, watching him with raised brows. He smirked. "Not really, but I want to." And somehow his awkward attempt at pasta or roasted chicken always came out perfect. They'd sit on the couch after dinner, her curled into his chest, his fingers lazily stroking her braids. Sometimes they didn't talk. Sometimes they whispered. About everything. How strange it was that love had grown from something so dark. How unexpected peace could feel. Julius began planning spontaneous getaways just to see her smile. Surprise weekends in Paris, a villa by the sea, mountaintop chalets where he wrapped her in his coat and whispered, "You make everything better." But it wasn't the luxury that melted Naima. It was the little things. The way he leaned to kiss her shoulder in the middle of a walk. The way he carried her to bed when she dozed off on the couch. The way his hand found hers beneath the table when no one was looking. One night she stirred from sleep, breathless, chest tight. A nightmare. A flash of her brother's betrayal. Julius sat up instantly, brushing hair from her face. "I'm here," he whispered, voice steady. "You're safe." And he held her until sleep returned. By the time her birthday came around, he had planned a rooftop dinner, just the two of them. Under string lights and city stars, he gave her a velvet box with a bracelet inside, thin gold, delicate diamonds, and one word engraved in cursive, "Forever yours." Naima's breath caught as he clasped it around her wrist. "This isn't just jewelry," Julius said, pulling her hand to his lips. "It's a promise." Tears filled her eyes. He kissed her gently. "I want to spend every day making you happy." And Naima knew, truly knew, that he meant every word. Julius West hadn't just fallen in love. He had transformed, not through force, not through fear, but through her. The evening air was thick with rain, the kind that soaked through coats and clouded the city in silence. Julius had just returned home from a late board meeting, his tie loosened, his coat still damp from the storm. He stepped through the massive front doors of the mansion and paused. Something was wrong. He felt it instantly. Naima stood in the hallway. Her arms were wrapped tightly around herself, her eyes wide and haunted. She looked like she had just seen a ghost. "What happened?" Julius asked, his voice low, protective. She hesitated, then whispered one name. "Marcus." Julius's eyes darkened. "Where?" Before she could answer, the front doors slammed open behind him. The sound echoed through the marble halls like a shot. Marcus Jones stormed in, drenched, unkempt, eyes bloodshot. He looked thinner than before, his frame more desperate, but the same reckless arrogance glimmered beneath his gaze. "Naima," Marcus said, his voice low, cruel. "I've come to collect." Julius immediately stepped in front of her, his body shielding hers. His voice was ice. "Get out." "I'm talking to my sister," Marcus snapped. "Not you." "She's not yours to talk to," Julius growled. "You lost that right the day you sold her." Naima flinched at the words. Her past, the weight of it, rushed back like a blow to the chest. Marcus smirked. "I made a mistake. I'm here to fix it." His voice turned darker. I need money. Julius's jaw clenched, fists tightening at his sides. You'll get nothing from me. Marcus's gaze flicked toward Naima. Maybe not from you, but she owes me. A flash of pain crossed Naima's face. Julius saw it, and it enraged him. She owes you nothing, Julius said, his voice dropping to a lethal growl. You gave her away like property, and now you dare ask for her help? Marcus sneered. I need it. You think you can keep her locked away in this palace, pretending she's not my blood? She's not yours anymore. Then I'll take something else, Marcus said coldly, stepping forward. Julius moved faster than lightning. In one savage motion, he grabbed Marcus by the collar and slammed him against the marble wall. The impact rattled the paintings. Naima gasped as Julius pressed forward, his voice deadly calm. Touch her again and you won't walk out of here. Marcus struggled, but Julius's grip was unshakable. You think I'm scared of you? Marcus spat. No, Julius whispered, leaning closer. But you should be, because if you ever come near her again, I'll erase you, and no one will ask where you went. Marcus's eyes widened with fear. You handed her over like she was nothing, Julius said, and now you come crawling back with empty pockets and threats? I should bury you in them. Julius released him. Marcus stumbled, gasping for breath, his hand clutching his throat. Get out, Julius ordered, his tone like iron. Marcus hesitated. His eyes flicked to Naima one last time, but the fierce protection in Julius's glare froze him in place. He turned and staggered out the front doors, disappearing into the downpour like the shadow he was. Julius stood still for a long moment, his breath harsh. Then he turned back. Naima was frozen near the staircase, her eyes wide, her hands shaking. When Julius crossed to her, she didn't speak. He cupped her face in both hands, his thumbs brushing away tears that had started to fall. He's gone, Julius said gently. He'll never hurt you again. Her lips parted, but all that came was a shaky breath. Julius pulled her into his arms, holding her like she might fall apart. I swear to you, Naima, no one will ever touch you. Not while I'm breathing. She buried her face in his chest. Her shoulders trembled. I've got you, he murmured. You're safe now. And he held her like he would never let go. Because he wouldn't. Soft sunlight filtered through the tall windows of the master bedroom. The breeze outside was gentle, carrying the scent of blooming jasmine from the garden. But Naima sat still, almost motionless at the edge of the bed, her hand resting protectively over her lower stomach. Her heart pounded. Her breathing was shallow. 2 pink lines had changed everything. She was pregnant. A child, Julius's child, was growing inside her. Tears welled in her eyes, though she wasn't sure if they were from fear or wonder. She had never imagined this for herself. Not this life, not this love, and definitely not this kind of beginning. But now, everything had changed, and she didn't know how Julius would react. Her thoughts were still tangled when the bedroom door opened. Julius entered, dressed down in a soft gray t-shirt and dark pants, his broad shoulders relaxed, his expression unreadable as he walked toward her. He leaned in and kissed her temple. You okay? He asked. She looked up slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. I need to tell you something. He froze, only slightly. His eyes immediately searched hers. What is it? Naima took his hand and guided it to her stomach. Her fingers trembled as she placed his palm there, resting it softly against the warmth of her belly. I'm pregnant. The silence that followed was deafening. Julius didn't move, didn't breathe. His gray eyes widened. He looked at her, then at his hand on her body, then back at her again, like he was trying to process something too vast to hold. Pregnant? He echoed. Voice hoarse. Naima nodded. Yes. He let out a shaky breath, and suddenly, without a word, he dropped to his knees in front of her. His arms wrapped around her waist, his forehead pressed against her stomach. Oh my God, he whispered, his voice full of awe, reverence, and something else, something trembling and raw. Naima ran her fingers through his hair, her heart aching with the tenderness of the moment. "We're having a baby," he murmured again, this time to the child. He looked up at her then, his eyes filled with emotion, glistening. "You've given me everything," he said. "And now you've given me this." Tears spilled from her eyes as Julius cupped her face in his hands and kissed her deeply. His touch trembled like he was afraid she might disappear. When he pulled back, his hand settled over her stomach again. "I swear," he said fiercely, "I'll protect you both with everything I have. No one will ever harm either of you. Ever." From that moment on, Julius transformed into something even deeper, more protective, more devoted. He refused to let Naima lift anything heavier than a pillow. He hired the top OB-GYNs in the city. He scheduled nutritionists, massage therapists, and prenatal yoga instructors, even though Naima swore she didn't need them. "You're carrying our future," he'd say, cooking breakfast himself and placing it gently in front of her like she was made of glass. "And I'll do everything to keep it safe." When morning sickness hit, he held her hair back. When her back ached, he massaged her shoulders. When her mood swung wildly from laughter to tears, he kissed her forehead and told her she was still the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. "I can't believe this is happening," Naima whispered one night, as they lay tangled on the couch, her head on his chest and his hand resting gently over her belly. "I can," Julius said softly. "I always saw a future with you. I just didn't know it would come this fast." Naima blinked up at him. "You really wanted a family?" He nodded. "I never admitted it, not even to myself. But now that it's real." He smiled faintly. "I've never wanted anything more." Later that week, as they lay in bed beneath soft linen sheets, Naima whispered, "I think it's a girl." Julius stilled, then looked at her with that same fierce, reverent gaze. "She's going to be strong," he said. "She's going to be brilliant, and she's going to have your fire." "And your stubbornness," Naima teased softly. He chuckled, then leaned down to kiss her bare stomach, his lips brushing the skin like a vow. "Whatever she gets from me, I'll make sure it's something she can be proud of." Naima's heart swelled. This wasn't just love anymore. This was family. This was future. And in Julius's arms, she had never felt more secure. The hospital room was warm and dim, the sound of the fetal monitor pulsing in steady rhythm. Naima lay propped up in the bed, beads of sweat clinging to her forehead, her fingers curled tightly around the blanket. The pain was sharp, rolling through her body like waves, but through it all, Julius never left her side. He stood next to her, gripping her hand, his jaw clenched, eyes focused only on her. "You're doing so good, baby," he whispered, pressing his forehead to hers between contractions. "I'm right here." Naima let out a shaky breath. "Julius, I'm scared." His hand tightened on hers. "Don't be. You're the strongest woman I know. And she's almost here." She nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. Not just from the pain, but from everything this moment meant. And then, she pushed. The sound of her cry filled the room, followed by the soft, quivering wail of a newborn child. Naima sobbed as the nurse gently placed the tiny, swaddled bundle into her arms. Her daughter. Perfect, pink-skinned, brown-eyed, and impossibly small. Julius stood frozen for a second. Then he leaned over her shoulder, his breath catching in his throat. She's perfect," he whispered. Naima looked up at him. "You want to hold her?" He nodded, voice choked. The nurse gently passed their daughter into his arms, and something shifted in him, something deep. Julius West, the man who once commanded empires with a glance, who had built an empire through power and intimidation, was undone in an instant. His hands cradled the baby as though she were made of glass. He stared at her with reverence, awe, and a kind of vulnerability that Naima had never seen before. "She has your nose," he murmured. "Your lips, too." Naima smiled, exhausted. She has your eyes. He looked up, his gray eyes glistening. She's ours. He turned back to the baby, pressing a kiss to her forehead. And I will spend every day of my life protecting you. Both of you. Naima reached for his hand, brushing her fingers over his knuckles. You already have. Back at the mansion, the nursery was filled with soft gold tones and ivory lace. Julius had worked with designers himself, rejecting anything that didn't feel perfect. Every corner was handcrafted with care, bookshelves already lined with stories he planned to read to her, a plush rocking chair nestled by the window, and hand-painted clouds stretching across the ceiling. At night, he sat beside Naima in that rocking chair, their daughter curled against his chest as he hummed softly. His arms were wrapped around both of them like a promise. You've given me everything I never knew I needed, Julius whispered one night as Naima rested her head against his shoulder. And you gave me safety, she replied softly. Love, a place to heal. Weeks passed, then months. Naima's art blossomed. Julius built her a gallery, quiet and elegant, tucked in the heart of the city. She named it Haven, because that's what he had become. He would visit during quiet afternoons, their daughter in his arms standing proudly as Naima sold her first collection. She's going to know how powerful her mother is, he'd whispered to the baby. At home, Julius still cooked, still held Naima's hand during meetings, still stared at her like she was the only thing in the room that mattered. And every night, after the baby was asleep, he would hold Naima close and say the same words against her skin. I love you. One night, as she rested against his chest beneath the moonlight pouring through their bedroom window, Naima whispered, Are you happy? Julius didn't hesitate. I was born the day you walked into my life, she smiled. That wasn't the day I walked in. That was the day you dragged me into your car. He chuckled, brushing his lips over her shoulder. Then maybe it wasn't how we started, but it's how we became. She turned in his arms and cupped his cheek, her thumb brushing over the edge of his beard. You became everything I didn't believe in, and you became my reason to believe, he whispered. As they lay together, their daughter sleeping in the next room, Julius knew without a doubt. This was the life he never expected. This was the love that had changed him forever. And this was his final vow. He would protect it, cherish it, live it forever.